My husband's gay partner came on our wedding day and spoiled everything, leaving me stranded. You won't believe what happened. Those were the words that echoed through Mona Lisa's mind as she stood frozen at the altar. The grand church, decorated with white roses and golden ribbons, had been her dream since childhood. Emmanuel stood beside her, his smile nervous but loving. Then, like a storm crashing into a calm sea, the church doors burst open. A man with sharp features and piercing eyes walked in, his voice cutting through the ceremony. "Stop this wedding!" Gasps filled the room. Mona Lisa's heart pounded. The man stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Emmanuel. "You can't marry her, Emmanuel," the man said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You love me." The room erupted in chaos. Mona Lisa's mother fainted. The pastor froze mid-sentence. Emmanuel's face turned pale, his jaw slack. What is he saying?" Mona Lisa stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Emmanuel didn't answer. The man stepped closer. "My name is Tony," he said, addressing Mona Lisa directly. "I've been with Emmanuel for years. He doesn't love you. He's been lying to you." Mona Lisa's world spun. Her dream wedding had turned into a nightmare, and she was left standing in the ruins of her shattered hopes. Mona Lisa's chest tightened as Tony's words hung in the air. The guests murmured in disbelief, their whispers mixing with the faint echoes of the church bells outside. "What is he talking about, Emmanuel?" Mona Lisa asked, her voice cracking. "Tell me he's lying." Emmanuel opened his mouth, but no words came out. His silence was deafening. Tony took a step forward. "He's not going to deny it because it's the truth," he said, his voice steady but filled with anguish. "We've been together for years. He promised me that we'd always be together. But when his family pressured him, he chose to marry you instead." Mona Lisa's knees buckled, and Clara, her maid of honor, rushed to her side. "Mona, breathe," Clara whispered, holding her up. The guests were now openly talking, their shocked faces turned toward the altar. Mona Lisa's father stood, his face red with anger. "What kind of nonsense is this?" he shouted, pointing at Tony. "Who are you to come here and ruin my daughter's wedding?" Tony ignored him and continued, his eyes fixed on Emmanuel. "You told me you couldn't go through with this. You said you'd tell her the truth. But instead, you brought me here to watch you marry her? Do you have any idea how that feels?" Emmanuel finally spoke, his voice low and shaky. "Tony, stop." "Stop?" Tony's voice rose. "You want me to stop? After you've lied to her, to your family, to everyone? No, Emmanuel. You don't get to pretend anymore." Mona Lisa's heart felt like it had shattered into a million pieces. She stepped away from Clara's support and looked directly at Emmanuel. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Answer me, Emmanuel. Is he telling the truth?" Emmanuel's shoulders slumped. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Mona, I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "Didn't mean for what to happen?" she demanded, her voice rising. "For me to find out that my fiancé, the man I was about to marry, has been lying to me? That you're in love with someone else?" "Mona, I care about you. I really do," Emmanuel pleaded. But you love him," she finished for him, her voice breaking. The church fell into a tense silence, broken only by Mona Lisa's sobs. Emmanuel reached out to her, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said, shaking her head. "Don't touch me." Tony, his face softening, approached Mona Lisa. "I didn't come here to hurt you," he said gently, "but you deserve to know the truth. Emmanuel doesn't love you the way you think he does. He's been living a lie, and dragging you into it isn't fair." Mona Lisa stared at him, her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to scream, to cry, to make everything disappear. But the truth was staring her in the face, and there was no escaping it. Clara took her hand. "Let's go, Mona," she whispered. "You don't need to stay here." Mona Lisa allowed herself to be led out of the church, her dream wedding left in ruins. As the doors closed behind her, she heard the chaos continue inside. The raised voices of Emmanuel's family, Tony's impassioned accusations, and the murmurs of stunned guests. Outside, the sun shone brightly, mocking her pain. Clara hailed a taxi, and Mona Lisa climbed in, feeling as if her entire world had just collapsed. Long before her dream turned into a nightmare, Mona Lisa had been blissfully unaware of the secrets that would later destroy her wedding day. The months leading up to the ceremony were a whirlwind of planning, excitement, and what she now realized were overlooked red flags. Mona Lisa met Emmanuel at a networking event in the bustling city of Lagos, where their connection was immediate. He was charming, intelligent, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that drew her in. Within weeks, they were inseparable. "I've never met anyone like you," Emmanuel had told her during one of their late-night conversations. "You're everything I've ever wanted." For Mona Lisa, his words felt like a fairy tale come true. But there had always been something just slightly off, a hesitation in his eyes at times, a guardedness she couldn't quite place. She had dismissed these moments, chalking them up to his reserved personality. Clara, her best friend and confidant, had been the first to voice concerns. "Are you sure about him, Mona?" Clara asked one evening as they sat in Mona Lisa's tiny apartment overlooking the city. "There's something about Emmanuel I can't put my finger on. He seems distant sometimes." Mona Lisa laughed it off. "He's just private, Clara. Not everyone is an open book." Clara frowned. "I just want you to be careful. Sometimes love makes us blind to the things we don't want to see." Mona Lisa appreciated Clara's concern but saw no reason to doubt Emmanuel. He had proposed 6 months into their relationship, surprising her with a romantic dinner and a sparkling diamond ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he had said, dropping to one knee, tears streaming down her face. Mona Lisa had said yes without hesitation. The engagement marked the beginning of an intense period of wedding planning. Mona Lisa threw herself into the details, from selecting the perfect venue to designing her dress. Emmanuel, however, seemed less enthusiastic. "You don't like the idea of a big wedding, do you?" Mona Lisa teased one evening as they finalized the guest list. "It's not that," Emmanuel replied, avoiding her gaze. "I just think the important thing is us, not all of this." She had found his answer sweet at the time, but now, in hindsight, it felt more like avoidance. The week before the wedding, Clara raised another concern. "Have you ever met any of his close friends?" Clara asked as they picked out flowers at a bustling market. Mona Lisa paused. "Well, I've met a few of his colleagues and some family members." "Why?" Clara shrugged, but didn't push further. The last straw came during the rehearsal dinner, held at a luxurious restaurant in the heart of the city. Emmanuel had been unusually tense, glancing at his phone every few minutes. Mona Lisa had brushed it off, thinking it was just pre-wedding nerves. But Clara noticed. "Something's not right, Mona," she whispered. "He's distracted." "I'm not entertaining doubts now," Mona Lisa replied firmly. "This is the happiest moment of my life, Clara. Please don't ruin it." That night, Emmanuel received a mysterious call that he took outside. When he returned, his expression was guarded. "Everything okay?" Mona Lisa asked. "Yes," Emmanuel said with a forced smile. "Just work." "Work? On the eve of their wedding?" Mona Lisa pushed the thought away, determined not to let anything dampen her excitement. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that something wasn't right. The memories of those ignored warnings played over and over in Mona Lisa's mind as she sat in Clara's apartment the morning after the disastrous wedding. Her dress, now crumpled and stained with tears, lay discarded in a heap on the floor. "I should have listened to you," Mona Lisa said, her voice hollow. Clara placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You couldn't have known, Mona. He fooled all of us." Mona Lisa looked out the window, watching the city move on as if her world hadn't just collapsed. Somewhere out there, Emmanuel and Tony were facing the aftermath of their actions, and she was left to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. Mona Lisa sat in Clara's apartment, a steaming cup of tea untouched in her hands. The events of the wedding replayed in her mind like a broken record. She barely noticed when Clara opened the door to let someone in. "Who is it?" Mona Lisa asked wearily, not even turning her head. "It's me," a familiar voice said. Mona Lisa froze. She turned slowly to see Tony standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of guilt and determination. Clara glared at him, but didn't stop him from stepping inside. "What are you doing here?" Mona Lisa asked, her voice cold. "I came to explain," Tony said softly. "You deserve to know the truth." Mona Lisa scoffed. "Truth? You ruined my wedding, humiliated me in front of my family and friends, and now you want to explain? Get out." Clara moved closer to Mona Lisa. "Do you want me to call someone to remove him?" "No," Mona Lisa said after a long pause. "Let him speak. I want to hear what he has to say." Tony hesitated, then sat on the edge of the couch, maintaining a careful distance. "First, I want to say that I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, Mona Lisa, but I couldn't sit there and let Emmanuel go through with something that wasn't real." Mona Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Wasn't real? My love for him was real. My plans for a future with him were real. What gives you the right to decide what's real for me?" Tony looked down, his guilt evident. "You're right. You didn't deserve this. But neither did I. Emmanuel and I have been together for 3 years. We met at an event, and from the moment we started talking, we knew we had something special. But he's always struggled with his identity, his family's expectations, society. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Mona Lisa's voice was sharp. "You call destroying someone's life complicated? You both could have told me the truth from the start." "I told him to," Tony admitted. "When he told me he was getting engaged to you, I begged him to tell you. But he said he couldn't disappoint his family. He was afraid of being judged, of being disowned. He said marrying you would make everything easier." Mona Lisa felt a pang in her chest. "Easier for him? What about me?" Tony sighed. "I know this is hard to hear, but Emmanuel did care about you. He just didn't love you the way you deserve to be loved." Clara interjected, her tone icy. "If you cared so much about Mona, why wait until the wedding day to tell the truth? You had months to stop this." "I tried," Tony said, his voice rising. "I tried so many times to talk to him, to make him face reality. But he wouldn't listen. Yesterday was my breaking point. Watching him stand there, about to marry someone else, pretending to be someone he's not. It was too much. I couldn't let it happen." Mona Lisa's hands trembled as she placed her cup on the table. "Do you even realize what you've done? You've left me broken. I don't even know who I am anymore." Tony's eyes softened. "I know you hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But you deserve the truth, even if it hurts. You deserve someone who will love you completely, without secrets." Mona Lisa looked at him, her anger warring with the nagging feeling that he was right. Still, the betrayal stung too deeply for her to process his words. "I need you to leave," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Tony nodded, standing up slowly. "For what it's worth, I truly am sorry." He left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing in the silent apartment. Clara sat beside Mona Lisa, pulling her into a comforting hug. "You don't have to listen to him, or Emmanuel. They don't get to define you, Mona. You're stronger than this." But as Mona Lisa rested her head on Clara's shoulder, she couldn't shake the weight of Tony's words. For the first time, she wondered if her love for Emmanuel had been built on an illusion. The morning after the ruined wedding, the city was alive with gossip. Mona Lisa's humiliation had already become the hottest topic on social media and among Lagos socialites. But as Mona Lisa tried to process her pain, Emmanuel's family had its own firestorm to deal with. Emmanuel's parents, Chief and Mrs. Okoji, had built their family's reputation on respectability and traditional values. To have their son publicly accused of being in a relationship with another man, at his wedding no less, was an unimaginable disgrace. Chief Okoji, a stern and imposing man, summoned Emmanuel to the family home in Ikoyi. Emmanuel arrived reluctantly, his face weary from the aftermath of the previous day. "You have brought shame to this family," Chief Okoji said as soon as Emmanuel stepped through the door. His voice was like thunder, and his words cut deep. "Papa, I didn't plan for any of this to happen," Emmanuel said, his tone defensive. "Didn't plan?" Mrs. Okoji exclaimed, her usually calm demeanor shattered. "So, it's true then? What that man said, about you and him, it's true." Emmanuel lowered his head, unable to meet their eyes. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" Chief Okoji bellowed. Do you know the disgrace you've brought upon this family? People are calling me, mocking me. You stood there and let us invite friends, business partners, and relatives to that wedding, knowing you weren't being honest? I didn't want to disappoint you, Emmanuel said, his voice breaking. You've always expected so much from me, and I thought marrying Mona Lisa would make you happy. Mrs. Okoji's face softened slightly, but her confusion remained. Why didn't you tell us? We are your parents. You could have come to us. And said what, Mama? That I'm gay? That I'm not the son you wanted me to be? Emmanuel's voice rose with frustration. I've been hiding who I am my entire life because of what I thought you'd say, how you'd react. And now, here we are. Chief Okoji shook his head, pacing the room. You've made a mess of everything. Not just for yourself, but for that poor girl and her family. What do you think they'll say? What do you think her father will do? Emmanuel swallowed hard. Mona Lisa's father, Mr. Adewale, was a man known for his pride and temper. He had already made it clear that he considered Emmanuel's union with his daughter a perfect alliance, one that would elevate both families socially and financially. Has anyone spoken to the Adewales? Emmanuel asked hesitantly. Not yet, Mrs. Okoji said, but they will. You'd better prepare yourself because they won't take this lightly. Meanwhile, in the Adewale household, the atmosphere was no less tense. Mona Lisa's father stormed through the living room, his hands clenched into fists. After everything we did for that boy, Mr. Adewale fumed. The money we spent, the preparations, and this is how he repays us? By humiliating my daughter in front of the whole city? Mona Lisa's mother, a soft-spoken woman, tried to calm him. Please, let's focus on Mona Lisa. She needs our support right now. She needs justice. Mr. Adewale shot back. That boy has disrespected this family. I won't let him get away with it. Papa, stop, Mona Lisa said weakly, entering the room. She looked pale and drained, her eyes still puffy from crying. Her father softened immediately, rushing to her side. My darling, I'm sorry you have to go through this. But don't worry, I'll make sure Emmanuel pays for what he's done. I don't want revenge, Papa, Mona Lisa said, her voice trembling. I just want to understand why this happened. Her father grumbled, but said no more. Her mother pulled her into a hug. You don't have to face this alone, my dear. We're here for you. The tension between the two families reached a boiling point when Emmanuel's parents decided to visit the Adewales to apologize. It was a tense meeting. Mr. Adewale refused to let Emmanuel step foot in the house, forcing him to wait outside while the parents spoke. My family deeply regrets what happened, Chief Okoji began. We were as blindsided as you were. Blindsided? Mr. Adewale scoffed. Your son knew exactly what he was doing. He deceived my daughter, my family, and everyone who trusted him. What kind of man does that? Please, Mrs. Okoji pleaded. We understand your anger. We only ask for your forgiveness, for our son's mistakes. Forgiveness? Mr. Adewale's voice rose. How do you forgive public disgrace? How do you erase this stain from my daughter's life? The conversation ended without resolution, and tensions between the families remained high. As Emmanuel sat in the car outside the Adewale house, he saw Mona Lisa step out onto the porch. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away and walked back inside. In that moment, he realized just how much he had lost and how much pain he had caused. Mona Lisa sat on Clara's couch, her head resting in her hands. The sting of humiliation and heartbreak hadn't lessened since the wedding day, and the weight of everyone's expectations, her family's, society's, even her own, felt unbearable. Clara, sitting across from her, studied her friend carefully. She had been waiting for the right moment to speak her mind. Mona, Clara began gently, you can't let this destroy you. Mona Lisa looked up, her eyes red and swollen. How can I not? My entire life has been turned upside down. Everyone is talking about me like I'm some kind of fool. People will always talk, Clara said firmly. But this isn't about them. It's about you. You can't let what happened define who you are. Mona Lisa sighed, leaning back against the couch. I don't even know who I am anymore, Clara. I thought I was going to be a wife, start a family. Now, I'm just the woman whose fiancé left her for a man. You're more than that, Clara insisted. You're Mona Lisa Adewale. You're smart, ambitious, and kind. Don't let Emmanuel's lies take that away from you. For a moment, silence filled the room. Clara reached out and took Mona Lisa's hand. Listen, Clara continued. I know you're hurting, but you need to stop focusing on what everyone else thinks. Focus on yourself. Take this time to heal, to figure out what you really want. What I want. Mona Lisa repeated bitterly. What I wanted was a husband who loved me. Now, I don't even know if that kind of love exists. Clara's expression softened. It does, Mona, but it starts with loving yourself first. You gave so much of yourself to Emmanuel that you didn't see the signs. You ignored your gut because you wanted so badly for things to work out. You deserve better, and that starts with not settling for less. Mona Lisa frowned, her friend's words cutting deeper than she cared to admit. Clara was right. She had ignored her instincts, dismissed the little things that didn't feel right, all in the name of love. What am I supposed to do now? Mona Lisa asked. Start small, Clara said. Focus on yourself, your career, your passions, your happiness. And if you need closure, talk to Emmanuel. Not for him, but for you. Mona Lisa hesitated. The idea of facing Emmanuel again made her stomach churn, but a part of her knew she needed answers to move on. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. Then take your time, Clara said. But don't let this linger forever. You're stronger than you think, Mona. Later that evening, Mona Lisa sat alone in her bedroom, staring out the window at the city lights. Clara's words echoed in her mind, filling her with a mix of hope and fear. Could she truly rebuild her life after everything that had happened? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Emmanuel. Can we talk? Please. I owe you an explanation. Mona Lisa's fingers hovered over the screen. A part of her wanted to delete the message and block his number. But another part, the part still searching for closure, knew she couldn't avoid him forever. Taking a deep breath, she replied, Tomorrow. In public. The response was short, cold, and final. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she was ready to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Mona Lisa arrived at the cafe early, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. She had chosen a bustling spot in the heart of Lagos, where the noise of the city could provide some comfort against the awkward silence she was certain would come. She ordered a cup of tea and sat by the window, her hands trembling as she stirred it absently. The moments stretched endlessly until she finally saw Emmanuel walk in. He looked disheveled, a shadow of the confident man she had once loved. As he approached, she stiffened. Her face was stoic, her emotions carefully hidden behind a mask of strength. Thanks for meeting me, Emmanuel said, sitting across from her. Let's just get this over with, Mona Lisa replied coldly. Emmanuel sighed, his hands fidgeting on the table. Mona, I don't even know where to start. I've replayed everything that happened in my head, and I know there's nothing I can say to make up for the pain I caused you. Then why are we here? She snapped, her anger bubbling to the surface. To hear more excuses? To make me feel like a fool again? No, he said quickly. I'm not here to justify myself. I'm here to tell you the truth I should have told you from the beginning. Mona Lisa crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. Go on. Emmanuel took a deep breath. I've known I was different since I was a teenager, but growing up in a family like mine, in a society like ours, there was no room to be myself. I was taught to hide it, to suppress it. When I met Tony, I felt something I'd never felt before, freedom, but I was too scared to embrace it fully. And yet, you thought marrying me was a good idea, she asked, her voice sharp. I thought it would fix everything, Emmanuel admitted, his voice cracking. I thought if I could just be the man my family wanted me to be, the man society expected me to be, I could live a normal life. I convinced myself that I cared about you enough to make it work. Mona Lisa's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You cared about me enough to lie to me? To lead me on for months? I didn't mean to hurt you, Emmanuel said, but I see now that I was selfish. I was trying to run from who I am, and in the process, I destroyed your dreams. For that, I'm truly sorry." Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I gave you everything," Mona Lisa said finally, her voice trembling. "I trusted you, Emmanuel. I was ready to build a life with you. And you threw it all away? For what? To protect your image? To keep your family happy?" Emmanuel's shoulders slumped. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know the truth. You deserve that much." Mona Lisa stared at him, searching his face for the man she had loved. But all she saw now was a stranger, a man who had betrayed her in the deepest way possible. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you," she said quietly, "but I hope one day you find the courage to be honest with yourself and with everyone else." Emmanuel nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I hope you can find happiness again, Mona. You deserve someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved." She stood, leaving her untouched tea on the table. "Goodbye, Emmanuel." As she walked out of the cafe, a sense of finality washed over her. She didn't feel relief or closure, but she felt stronger. For the first time since that disastrous day, she knew she would survive this. Mona Lisa walked back to Clara's apartment, the conversation with Emmanuel playing in her mind. Though she had gotten some of the answers she sought, the wounds were still fresh. But as she stepped through the door, she resolved to focus on herself for the first time in months. Clara greeted her with a curious look. "How did it go?" "It went," Mona Lisa said, slumping onto the couch. "He apologized, explained himself, and that's it." Clara handed her a glass of water and sat beside her. "How do you feel?" Mona Lisa took a sip, then placed the glass on the coffee table. "Angry, sad, relieved, I guess. I don't know. But I told him goodbye." Clara nodded approvingly. "Good. Now you can finally start to heal." Mona Lisa sighed. "Easier said than done." "True," Clara said. "But you're not alone. And the best way to heal is to take back control of your life." The next morning, Mona Lisa decided to take Clara's advice. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began writing a list of goals, things she had always wanted to do but had put off while planning her life around Emmanuel. 1. Focus on my career. 2. Travel to at least 2 new places. 3. Take a photography course. I've always loved it. 4. Start therapy. 5. Learn to say no. The list was small but meaningful. She pinned it to her wall as a reminder of her new direction. Mona Lisa returned to her job at a prestigious PR firm in Lagos, where she had taken a brief leave of absence to focus on the wedding. Her boss, Mrs. Ojiako, was a no-nonsense woman who valued Mona Lisa's work ethic. "It's good to have you back," Mrs. Ojiako said during their meeting. "I know things have been tough, but I hope diving into work will help." "It already is," Mona Lisa replied with a small smile. "What's on my plate?" Mrs. Ojiako handed her a file. "A major account. The client is launching a luxury fashion line, and they need someone who can handle high-profile events and media relations. I think you're the perfect fit." Mona Lisa nodded. She threw herself into the project, spending late nights at the office and brainstorming innovative ideas. The work gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. On weekends, Mona Lisa explored her love for photography. She joined a local class and met other budding photographers who shared her enthusiasm. One day, during a group outing to the bustling Balagan market, she found herself engrossed in capturing candid shots of vendors, colorful fabrics, and Lagos's vibrant street life. She felt a spark of joy she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her instructor, Mr. Femi, reviewed her work and offered praise. "You have an eye for storytelling through your photos. Keep it up." Hearing those words filled her with pride. For the first time, Mona Lisa saw herself as more than just a woman recovering from heartbreak. She was discovering new layers of herself. At Clara's insistence, Mona Lisa began therapy. Her therapist, Dr. Igioma, was a warm and patient woman who encouraged her to unpack the emotions she had buried. "Why do you think you ignored the warning signs with Emmanuel?" Dr. Igioma asked during one session. Mona Lisa thought carefully before answering. "I think I was afraid of being alone. Everyone around me was settling down, and I didn't want to be left behind. I convinced myself that love could grow, even if it didn't feel perfect." Dr. Igioma nodded. That's understandable, but it's also important to recognize your worth. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions or secrets. One afternoon, while taking photos at a cultural festival, Mona Lisa accidentally bumped into a man carrying a tray of suya. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, looking up at him. He laughed, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "No harm done. I'm Tun, by the way." Mona Lisa introduced herself, feeling a bit awkward. They struck up a conversation about the festival, and she discovered that Tund was a travel writer who had explored parts of Nigeria she had always dreamed of visiting. Before parting ways, he handed her a card. "If you ever want to collaborate, your photos, my writing, let me know." Mona Lisa smiled politely and tucked the card into her bag. That evening, Clara teased her. "So, who's this Tund you mentioned 3 times?" "He's just someone I met at the festival," Mona Lisa said, trying to downplay it. "Uh-huh," Clara replied with a smirk. "Just don't forget, you're focusing on you right now." "I haven't forgotten," Mona Lisa said with a laugh. But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't help but wonder if meeting Tund was more than just coincidence. Mona Lisa decided not to overthink her encounter with Tund. She had made a promise to herself. Her priority was her healing and personal growth. Still, she kept his card in her drawer, unsure if she'd ever use it. For now, she had plenty to focus on: her career, her photography, and rediscovering who she was outside of the shadow of her failed relationship. Her work at the PR firm was flourishing. The luxury fashion account she'd been assigned was turning out to be one of the most challenging yet rewarding projects of her career. Mona Lisa had secured a partnership between her client and a popular Nigerian influencer, and the campaign was gaining traction online. One afternoon, while reviewing content in her office, her boss walked in with a rare smile. "Mona, you've outdone yourself," Mrs. Ojiako said, handing her a document. "This campaign's early success has caught the attention of one of the biggest fashion houses in Paris. They want to collaborate, and they've specifically asked for you to lead the team." Mona Lisa blinked, stunned. "Paris? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You've earned this. It's a short trip, just 2 weeks, but it's an opportunity to showcase your talent on a global scale." Mona Lisa felt a rush of excitement. Paris, the city of lights, art, and endless inspiration. It was the kind of opportunity she never would have pursued had she still been planning her life around a manual. In her next therapy session, Mona Lisa shared the news with Dr. Igioma. "That's wonderful," Dr. Igioma said with a warm smile. "How does it feel to have something so exciting to look forward to?" "It feels liberating," Mona Lisa admitted. "For so long, I thought my happiness depended on someone else. But now, I'm starting to see that I can create it for myself." "That's an important realization," Dr. Igioma said. "Happiness isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. And you're doing just that." Before her trip, Mona Lisa decided to reach out to Tund. Though she was careful not to rush into anything romantic, she was curious about the collaborative potential he had mentioned. She texted him, "Hi, Tund. It's Mona Lisa from the festival. I was wondering if you're still interested in working on something together? I'd love to hear more about your travel writing." Tund responded almost immediately, "Mona Lisa, of course, I'm interested. How about coffee next weekend to brainstorm?" They met at a cozy cafe overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Tund's passion for travel was infectious, and Mona Lisa found herself captivated by his stories of exploring Nigeria's hidden gems, villages with breathtaking landscapes, vibrant festivals, and the warmth of local communities. "I think your photography could bring these stories to life," Tund said. "You have a way of capturing emotion in your shots." Mona Lisa blushed. "Thanks. I'd love to collaborate. Maybe we can start with something small, an article with a photo essay?" "That sounds perfect," Tund said with a smile. As they left the cafe, Mona Lisa realized she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The weeks leading up to her Paris trip were a whirlwind. Between finalizing campaign details and packing for her journey, Mona Lisa barely had time to think about anything else. Clara, ever the supportive friend, came over the night before to help her pack. "Paris," Clara said dreamily as she folded a blouse. "Who would have thought? This is exactly what you need, Mona." a fresh start in every sense of the word. Mona Lisa smiled. It does feel like a new chapter. For the first time, I'm excited about the future. Clara raised a glass of wine. To Paris, and to new beginnings. As Mona Lisa boarded the plane, she looked out the window and felt a wave of gratitude. Though her journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. She was no longer the woman who had defined herself by her relationship. She was rediscovering her strength, her passions, and her identity. And as the plane soared into the sky, she knew this was only the beginning of her story. Mona Lisa arrived in Paris with a sense of awe that only a first-time visitor to the City of Lights could understand. The crisp, fresh air, the beauty of the historic streets, and the sheer magnificence of the Eiffel Tower lit up against the night sky made her feel like she had stepped into a dream. She was here to work, but she knew that Paris would also be a place of self-discovery. Her first few days were filled with meetings, planning sessions, and the kind of high-pressure work she thrived in. The luxury fashion house had given her a clear vision for the campaign, but Mona Lisa's input and creative direction had brought a fresh perspective that the team was excited about. It was exhilarating. Every moment, every interaction felt like a validation of her skills and abilities. She found herself walking the streets of Paris in the evenings, after her work was done, basking in the energy of the city. She took photos of the Seine River at sunset, the twinkling lights of Montmartre, and the small, quiet cafes tucked away in the winding alleys. But despite all the excitement, a part of Mona Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing. She thought about Emmanuel, how he had once promised her the world, only to leave her shattered. She thought about her own emotional journey, how she had tried to rebuild, to trust again. In Paris, she realized just how far she had come. Her phone buzzed one evening after she had finished taking pictures near the Arc de Triomphe. It was a message from Tund. Mona Lisa, how's Paris treating you? I hope the trip is everything you dreamed of. I'm still waiting for that collaboration we talked about. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Mona Lisa smiled as she read the message. It was one of the few things from home that felt light and carefree. A reminder that she wasn't alone in this new chapter. Paris is everything. I'm loving it here, but I'll definitely need some help with the travel stories I've been collecting. Let's make it happen soon. The message back was quick. Sounds amazing. Let's set a date for our first brainstorm. I can't wait to see what you've captured. Mona Lisa felt a sense of connection, something genuine, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel excited about the future. One evening, Mona Lisa was invited to an exclusive gala event for the fashion house she was working with. The venue was a stunning mansion on the outskirts of Paris, where the world's elite gathered to discuss business, fashion, and trends. Mona Lisa had never been in a room full of such influential people. She felt both out of place and utterly captivated by the glamour of it all. As she made her way to the drinks table, a man approached her. He was tall, with sharp features, dressed in a tailored suit. "You're Mona Lisa, aren't you?" he said, his voice smooth and confident. Mona Lisa paused, trying to place him. "I am. And you are?" "I'm Alexander," he said, offering her a glass of champagne. "I've been following your work for a while now. I must say, you're quite talented." Mona Lisa smiled politely, though she was wary. She had never been one to trust strangers easily, especially in such high-profile settings. "Thank you," she said, accepting the drink. "I'm still getting the hang of this world, to be honest." "Well, you're doing an excellent job," Alexander said. "Your PR work is causing quite a stir back in Lagos. People are already talking about you." Mona Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Absolutely. I know a few people who would love to collaborate with someone like you. Someone with your vision and skills. You're making waves." She wasn't sure how to respond. It sounded too much like a sales pitch, and she wasn't about to get wrapped up in any new projects without careful thought. "I appreciate the kind words, Alexander, but right now, I'm focused on the project I'm here for. I'm not looking to make any new commitments at the moment." He gave a charming smile. "Of course. But remember my name, Mona Lisa. You never know when the right opportunity will come knocking." With that, he walked away, leaving her feeling a bit unsettled. The next day, Mona Lisa took the day off from work to explore the city further. She visited the Louvre, standing in awe before the paintings and sculptures that had captivated her for centuries. She wandered through the Tuileries gardens, letting the warm Parisian sun wash over her. She found a quiet cafe near the Place de la Concorde and sat with a cup of coffee, watching the world go by. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mona Lisa felt truly at peace. There were no wedding plans, no heartbreak, no unresolved issues weighing her down. It was just her, in the moment, savoring the experience. As she scrolled through her phone, she saw a notification from Tund. "I'm heading to Lagos next week. Let's meet up to talk about the collaboration and share stories." Mona Lisa felt a smile spread across her face. It was a simple message, but it meant a lot to her. She had spent so much of her life catering to the needs of others, first Emmanuel, then her career, and even her family's expectations. Now, she was starting to make choices that were for her. She responded, "Can't wait to see you. Let's get to work on this project together." In that moment, Mona Lisa realized that she wasn't just building a career or traveling the world. She was creating a new life, one filled with opportunities and possibilities. It wasn't perfect, and there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready for whatever came her way. Mona Lisa stood at the window of her Paris hotel room, watching as the early morning mist slowly lifted over the city. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, creativity, and the kind of work that made her feel alive. She had transformed, not just professionally but personally, discovering a strength and resilience she never knew she had. But now, it was time to return to Lagos. She had a flight back that afternoon, and as excited as she was to reunite with Clara and dive back into her projects, a part of her was reluctant to leave Paris behind. She had found so much clarity here. "Focus on the present," she whispered to herself. "Lagos awaits." The flight from Paris to Lagos was long, but Mona Lisa passed the time catching up on emails, responding to messages from her colleagues, and making plans for the upcoming weeks. By the time she landed back at Murtala Muhammad International Airport, her mind was buzzing with ideas. Clara was waiting for her at the airport, waving enthusiastically as she spotted Mona Lisa exiting the terminal. "Mona, you're back," Clara said, pulling her into a hug. "I've missed you. How was Paris? Tell me everything." Mona Lisa smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for her best friend's unyielding support. "Paris was incredible, Clara. It was everything I needed. I think it's the place where I found myself again." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Found yourself? I thought you were already the epitome of confidence and grace." Mona Lisa laughed. "I thought I was too, but I didn't realize how much I was still holding on to the past, until I saw myself in a completely new environment. It was like all the pieces finally clicked." "That sounds amazing," Clara said as they made their way to the car. "And you're back just in time. We have a lot to catch up on here. Your clients have been raving about your work, and I've heard you're getting some serious attention." Mona Lisa felt a rush of excitement. "I'm ready for it. Let's see what the next chapter brings." Back at her apartment, Mona Lisa felt the weight of the creative energy she had gathered in Paris. Her work on the fashion campaign was far from over, and now it was time to bring Tund's travel stories to life. She had arranged a meeting with him that very weekend to discuss their collaboration. The day arrived, and Mona Lisa made her way to the cafe where they had met months earlier. She was a little nervous. Tund had become someone she genuinely enjoyed talking to, and now they were about to take their connection to a professional level. Tund was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table with his laptop open, scribbling in a notebook. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Mona Lisa, you made it," he said, standing to greet her. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, sitting down. They wasted no time in diving into the project. As they began brainstorming, Mona Lisa felt a sense of excitement rise within her. They worked seamlessly together. Tund's words and Mona Lisa's images were a perfect complement. She realized that their collaboration was not only creatively fulfilling but also emotionally uplifting. There was a spark in their working relationship, one that felt easy and natural. "I think this is going to be incredible," Tund said as they reviewed their progress. "We've got something special here, Mona." She nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "I think so too." For the first time in a long while, Mona Lisa felt like she was truly on the right path. Later that evening, after her meeting with Tund, Mona Lisa returned home to find a missed call from her mother. The feeling of dread she had learned to ignore over the years resurfaced. Her mother's calls were often an invitation for uncomfortable conversations, usually about her personal life and the pressure to settle down. She hesitated for a moment before dialing back. "Hello?" her mother answered, her voice soft but firm. "Mama, how are you?" Mona Lisa said, trying to sound casual. "I'm fine, Mona," her mother replied. "I wanted to check in on you. How's everything going? I hope you're settling in well after your trip." "It's going well, Mama. I'm busy with work, but everything's fine." Mona Lisa wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but she braced herself. "I see," her mother said, pausing as if collecting her thoughts. "Mona, I know you're doing well in your career, but have you thought about settling down? I know things didn't work out with Emmanuel, but there are good men out there. Don't let your heart become too hardened, my child." Mona Lisa's stomach tightened. She had expected this conversation, but she wasn't ready for it. She had worked so hard to heal and embrace her independence, and now her mother's words threatened to drag her back into the past. "I'm focusing on myself right now, Mama," Mona Lisa said, her voice steady but firm. "I'm not thinking about relationships right now. I'm building a life for myself." Her mother's sigh on the other end of the line was audible. "You're my only daughter, Mona. I just want you to be happy. Sometimes that means having someone by your side." Mona Lisa took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I understand, Mama. I'll be fine. I promise." She hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair, the weight of her mother's expectations heavy on her shoulders. But Mona Lisa had come too far to let anyone dictate her path now. She had her own dreams to chase, her own future to build. Just as she was starting to relax, Mona Lisa's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. The message was from Emmanuel. "Mona Lisa, I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk to you. Please, I owe you an explanation. Can we meet?" Mona Lisa stared at the message for a long time. The ghost of her past had returned. Emmanuel was reaching out again. She had moved on, but a part of her wondered what he wanted now. For a moment, she considered ignoring the message. But then, with a steadying breath, she typed her reply. "I'm not sure what you have to say, but I'll hear you out. Let's meet." Mona Lisa knew that this meeting could either bring closure or open old wounds, but whatever happened, she would face it with the strength she had found within herself. The evening was cooler than usual as Mona Lisa made her way to the cafe where she had agreed to meet Emmanuel. She had spent the last few hours debating whether or not she should even go through with it. Part of her wanted to move forward with her life, free from the past. But another part, one she tried not to acknowledge, still wanted answers. She had thought she had closed that chapter of her life. Emmanuel had hurt her deeply, and in doing so, he had taught her a painful lesson in trust and self-worth. Yet, despite all the healing she had gone through, the thought of facing him again felt like reopening a wound. When she arrived, Emmanuel was already sitting at a corner table, looking strangely unfamiliar. The man she had known years ago had transformed. He was older now, his face marked with the passage of time. He still had that same calm demeanor, but there was an uncertainty in his eyes that Mona Lisa hadn't seen before. He stood as she approached, his expression a mix of regret and tentative hope. "Mona Lisa," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. She nodded, keeping her posture neutral. "Emmanuel." They sat down, and the awkward silence between them was palpable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mona Lisa felt 1,000 emotions stirring within her. Anger, sadness, betrayal, but also a deep curiosity about why he had reached out. Finally, Emmanuel broke the silence. "I know you didn't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand something." He paused, looking down at the table before meeting her gaze again. "When I left, it wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I was afraid." Mona Lisa's brow furrowed. "Afraid? Afraid of what?" He exhaled slowly, as if gathering the strength to say the words he had held back for so long. "Afraid of who I am. Afraid that if I stayed, I would hurt you more than I already had." I never told you the truth, Mona Lisa. The truth about me and my feelings. Her heart raced as she tried to keep her composure. What are you talking about, Emmanuel? He took a deep breath. I had a partner. A man. I've always known, but I didn't know how to tell you. I loved him, Mona Lisa. And in loving him, I realized that I could never give you the life you deserved. You needed someone who was whole, who could truly be there for you. Mona Lisa felt the ground beneath her shift. She had suspected something was amiss during their relationship, but she never imagined it would be this. She stared at him, processing the words, feeling a mix of disbelief and sadness. So, all that time, I was with someone who wasn't being honest with me? Mona Lisa's voice was low, almost a whisper, as the anger began to rise. I should have told you, Emmanuel said, his voice cracking. I should have been honest with you from the start, but I was afraid. I was afraid of losing you, and I was afraid of facing the truth myself. I didn't know how to tell you, how to explain who I was. Mona Lisa sat back, crossing her arms. Her emotions were tangled, making it hard to process what he was saying. Part of her wanted to scream, to lash out, but the other part of her, the one that had spent so long healing, wanted to understand. You left me on our wedding day, Mona Lisa said, her voice tight with hurt. You didn't even have the decency to tell me this before. You just vanished. I waited for you. I was ready to spend my life with you, and then you ruined everything. Emmanuel lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. I know, and I can't take that back. I made the biggest mistake of my life. You deserved so much more than what I gave you. A bitter laugh escaped Mona Lisa's lips. I deserved the truth. I deserved honesty. But instead, I was left with a broken heart and a shattered future. There was a long silence. Mona Lisa fought to maintain control over her emotions. She had waited for this moment for so long, but now that it was here, it felt empty. She had imagined so many different scenarios in her mind, but none of them had prepared her for the rawness of this conversation. Why now? Mona Lisa asked quietly, her voice strained. Why reach out to me now, after everything? Emmanuel looked up, his eyes filled with regret. Because I want to make things right. I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know that I've changed. I'm with him now, my partner. We're living together, and I'm finally at peace with who I am. But I've spent every day since I left, thinking about you, about what I lost. I want you to have the life you deserve, Mona Lisa. I want to apologize for everything. Mona Lisa felt a pang in her chest, but it wasn't the pain she had felt when he first left. This was something different, something deeper. She had wanted closure, and now she had it. But it wasn't the kind of closure that healed the wound. It only made it clearer. I appreciate your apology, Emmanuel, Mona Lisa said slowly, but I'm not sure I can forgive you. Not yet, at least. You broke me, and it took a long time to rebuild myself. I understand, he replied softly. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, not now. I just needed you to know the truth. Mona Lisa sat back in her chair, trying to gather her thoughts. She had wanted this conversation for so long, but now that it had happened, she realized something important. Emmanuel's truth, no matter how painful, had no power over her anymore. I've moved on, Emmanuel, she said, standing up from the table. I've rebuilt my life, my career, and myself. I don't need your apology to move forward, but I will remember what you've said. I'll take the truth with me, and that's enough for me to heal completely. Emmanuel nodded, a sad smile on his face. I'm glad you found peace, Mona Lisa. You deserve it. As she turned to leave, Mona Lisa felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The conversation with Emmanuel had not been easy, but it had been necessary. She wasn't going to waste any more time on the past. She had a future to build, and nothing, not even the man who once held her heart, could stand in the way of it. Mona Lisa stepped out of the cafe, the cold night air hitting her face. Her mind was buzzing with thoughts, but the sense of finality in her heart gave her an unexpected peace. She had spent so much time trying to make sense of what happened with Emmanuel, replaying the past over and over in her mind. Now, with the conversation behind her, she felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The streets of Lagos were alive with energy. Cars honking, street vendors calling out their wares, the usual hustle and bustle of the city. But Mona Lisa walked with a renewed sense of purpose, feeling more aligned with who she was becoming. The conversation with Emmanuel had confirmed something she had long suspected. She didn't need him, or anyone else, to validate her worth. She had already come so far on her own. As she walked, her phone buzzed in her bag. She took it out, and it was a message from Tund. "Mona, I've been thinking about our project. I've got a few ideas I want to run by you. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss?" She smiled. It was exactly the kind of distraction she needed right now. Tund had become someone she could rely on, not just for work, but for the simple joy of creative collaboration. "Sounds great. How about we meet at the cafe in Lekki at 11 a.m.? She replied. A few seconds later, his reply came through. "Perfect. I'll see you then." Mona Lisa tucked her phone back into her bag, walking briskly through the vibrant streets. She was done with dwelling on the past. Now, her eyes were focused on the future. There was still so much to explore, so much to do. The next morning, Mona Lisa arrived at the cafe a little early, her thoughts still racing from the night before. She wasn't sure what was ahead, but she knew she was ready for whatever the future had to offer. The pain from Emmanuel's betrayal still lingered, but it wasn't something that would define her anymore. She had faced her past and had come out the other side stronger. Tund arrived shortly after, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Mona, you're early as usual," he joked, sitting down across from her. "I like your energy." Mona Lisa grinned. "I've been working on it," she said, sipping her coffee. "I'm in a good space right now. I'm ready to take on whatever comes next." She felt a sense of liberation as she spoke those words. She wasn't just talking about her career or the project she was working on. She was talking about her life, her whole life. "I'm glad to hear that. I can tell from your work in Paris. It's been amazing seeing you grow," Tund said, his tone sincere. "Which brings me to the project. I've got some ideas, and I think it could be the one that really takes both our careers to the next level." Mona Lisa leaned in, intrigued. "Tell me more." Tund's eyes gleamed with excitement as he pulled out his laptop and began to show her a series of concept designs. "This project combines travel, culture, and fashion. 3 things we both love. It's going to be immersive. We'll showcase the local cultures of Lagos, but through the lens of modern fashion and style. We're going to change the game, Mona." Mona Lisa felt her pulse quicken. She was immediately hooked on the idea. This was exactly the kind of project she had been craving. A way to merge her passion for creativity with her love for storytelling. "This is incredible, Tund," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm. "I think this could put us both on the map. It's fresh, it's bold, and it's exactly what Lagos needs right now." They spent the next few hours refining the concept, bouncing ideas off each other, and discussing logistics. Mona Lisa couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so alive about a project. This was more than just work. It was a chance to create something groundbreaking. It was a chance to leave a legacy. By the end of the meeting, they had the skeleton of a campaign that would bring together fashion influencers, travel bloggers, and local creatives to tell a new story of Lagos. One that celebrated its vibrancy, diversity, and untold beauty. Mona Lisa was eager to get started, and Tund was equally excited to see it come to life. "I'm all in," she said with a grin, standing up and extending her hand to Tund. "Let's make this happen." Tund shook her hand, his face lighting up with a wide smile. "I knew you'd be the perfect partner for this, Mona. Let's show the world what we're made of." As Mona Lisa left the cafe, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter than it had in a long time. She had started the day uncertain about where her life was heading, but now she was filled with hope and anticipation. The work she had been doing for months was paying off, and she was beginning to see the fruits of her labor. The air in Lagos felt different today, full of potential and possibility. Her past, with all its heartbreak, was finally behind her. She had embraced the truth of who she was, and in doing so, she had unlocked a new sense of freedom. Her phone buzzed again. It was Clara. "Mona, I heard from a little birdie that you and Tund are up to something big. Spill the tea, girl." Mona Lisa chuckled as she typed back. "It's happening. Big things are coming. I'll fill you in soon. Can't wait to catch up." As she walked through the busy streets of Lagos, she realized something important. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And she was doing it on her own terms. Mona Lisa had spent too much of her life being shaped by the expectations of others, but now, she was the one who held the pen. The future was in her hands,